Welcome back to Market Dive, the show that helps you cut through the noise and get to the heart of what's moving the markets. I'm Kian,
I'm Nika.
and we're diving into a question that, well, it sounds a little out there.
Yeah.
Could Bitcoin realistically hit $1 million a coin by 2030?
It does have a certain ring to it, doesn't it?
It does, it does.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, some really big names in finance, they seem to think it's not just possible, it's maybe even probable.
We're talking about some heavy hitters.
Yeah, Cathie Wood, Peter Thiel,
Elon Musk,
Jack Dorsey,
Mike Novogratz.
even the Winklevoss twins.
Yeah, they've been pretty vocal about it.
These aren't exactly, fringe figures.
Right.
So let's set the stage here.
Okay.
Bitcoin, right now, it's priced around $42,000
Mm-hmm.
and has a market cap hovering somewhere around $800 billion.
Give or take.
To hit that $1 million mark, well, we need to see a pretty significant jump,
We would.
over 25 times its current value.
More than 25x.
And the market cap would have to explode to, well, a mind-boggling $20 trillion.
Yeah, and it's where I think a lot of people get tripped up on this whole concept of market cap.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't actually mean that $800 billion is sitting in Bitcoin right now, right?
Yeah.
It's just a way to represent the total value of all the Bitcoin out there, all the Bitcoin in circulation.
So help us understand that. How does market cap really work? Because it is a bit of a head scratcher for some folks.
Yeah, it's really pretty simple when you break it down.
Okay.
Think of it this way. It's just the current price of an asset
Okay.
multiplied by the total number of units that are out there.
Okay.
So with Bitcoin, you're taking that current price, around $42,000,
Yeah.
and you're multiplying it by the total number of Bitcoins that will ever exist, which is 21 million.
Ah, so it's not about the total money invested.
No,
It's about the potential value
exactly.
if every single Bitcoin was sold right now
At the current price, yeah.
at the current price. I see.
Right. And that's why even a relatively small amount of new money coming in can cause a pretty big price jump.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it makes you wonder what happens when the demand really starts to outweigh the supply.
Yeah.
Especially when you consider that something like 90% of all the Bitcoin that will ever exist has already been mined.
That's right. And don't forget about the, 4 million Bitcoins that are estimated to be lost forever.
Oh, wow.
Just gone.
Keys lost, wallets lost.
Yeah. So that effectively reduces the supply even further.
Right.
And that scarcity, that's built-in scarcity, it's a big part of what makes Bitcoin so intriguing.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got this limited supply, potentially increasing demand, and a market cap that's pretty sensitive to even small changes in investment. How does all of this add up to a potential $1 million Bitcoin? What would it take to actually get there?
Well, there are a number of things that could really push the price of Bitcoin higher.
Okay, so what are we talking about? What are those things, those catalysts that could actually put Bitcoin on that path to $1 million?
One area to watch really closely is the remittance market.
Okay, remittance, so sending money across borders.
Exactly. People sending money across borders. It's a huge market. And right now it's dominated by, well, these traditional systems, right?
Right.
They're slow, they're expensive, and they're often really bureaucratic.
Yeah. I mean, you're talking Western Union, MoneyGram, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And those guys, they take their cut. So Bitcoin transactions, they're generally much faster, and they often have lower fees.
Right. And that makes it particularly appealing, I imagine, for people sending money to, maybe developing countries where traditional financial services, they might be harder to come by.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's say, hypothetically, Bitcoin were to capture, I don't know, even half of that remittance market. We could be looking at an additional $300 billion added to its market cap.
Wow. Okay, so that's the remittance market. What else?
Another key area, I think, are emerging market currencies. A lot of these currencies, they're volatile,
Yeah.
prone to inflation.
Not exactly stable.
No, so they're not exactly a reliable store of value.
Right.
So people in those countries, they're always looking for a safer alternative, a way to protect their savings.
So in a way, Bitcoin, with that limited supply, its decentralized nature, you could almost see it as a safe haven asset.
Exactly. If Bitcoin were to capture just 10% of that emerging market, currency market,
10%.
yeah, we'd be talking about a potential $2.8 trillion surge in its market cap.
Wow. Okay, so we've got the remittance market. We've got emerging market currencies. Anything else?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Lay it on me.
Let's talk about economic settlement networks.
Okay.
So these are the systems that banks use to transfer trillions of dollars back and forth.
Every day, right?
Every single day. I mean, it's the backbone of the global financial system,
Right.
but a lot of it still relies on this really outdated technology.
So you're talking SWIFT, FedWire,
You're right.
that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it can take days sometimes to actually process those transactions.
Days.
Really?
Yeah. Bitcoin could, well, it could streamline that whole process, make
Yeah.
it faster, cheaper, more efficient.
Okay, so what kind of impact could that have on the market cap?
Okay, so even if Bitcoin were to capture just 25% of that market, we're talking about another $3.8 trillion added to its market cap.
It's amazing so many of these numbers seem so small,
Right.
like 10%, 25%, but the impact is huge.
It is. The numbers are mind-boggling. Okay, and then you have nation-state treasuries.
Okay, yeah, I mean, we're already seeing some countries, like El Salvador, actually adopting Bitcoin as legal tender.
Right, and if that trend were to catch on globally, even if just a tiny 1% of nation-state treasuries adopted Bitcoin,
1%.
another $3.8 trillion would be pumped into Bitcoin.
So governments themselves could become major holders of Bitcoin.
They could. I mean, imagine the signal that would send to the market.
Wow. Okay, so we've got remittance, emerging markets, those economic settlement networks, and governments getting in on the action.
Oh, and don't forget the big fish.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Who are the big fish we're talking about here?
High net worth individuals.
Right.
Institutional investors.
These are the players, the whales, the people with, trillions of dollars in assets looking for places to invest.
Right. And even a small allocation from these guys could have a massive impact on Bitcoin's price.
So you're saying, like, if high net worth individuals were to allocate, I don't know, 5% of their portfolios to Bitcoin?
It would add another $4 trillion to its market cap. And if institutional investors like BlackRock were to allocate just 2.5%, boom, another $4.1 trillion.
It's crazy how much money could potentially flow into this.
It is, isn't it? And that's not all. Corporate treasury bonds, that's where companies raise capital through debt.
Right.
It's another massive opportunity. Even if corporations allocated just 5% of their bond holdings to Bitcoin,
What would that do?
inject a further $4.2 trillion into the market.
It's like every time we turn around, there's another massive pool of potential investment out there.
Right. And then, of course, there's gold,
Ah, yes, gold.
the classic safe haven asset. And a lot of people see Bitcoin as, like a digital version of gold, right?
Digital gold. Yeah.
Offering similar benefits. It's scarce. It can be a hedge against inflation. So if Bitcoin were to capture even half of gold's market share, we'd be talking about a $5.5 trillion increase in its market cap.
So we've gone through all these potential catalysts, each one with the potential to inject trillions of dollars into Bitcoin. What does that all add up to?
If you add up the potential impact of all these things we talked about, you get a total potential market cap for Bitcoin of around $28.5 trillion. And that translates to a price of about $1.36 million per coin.
I'll admit, when we started this whole deep dive, I was a little skeptical. That whole $1 million Bitcoin idea,
Yeah.
it seemed so far out there. But after hearing all this, it's starting to sound a lot less crazy.
Yeah. It is important to remember, though, that this is all speculative.
Of course.
There's no guarantee that any of these things will actually happen. But the fact that these possibilities even exist, I think it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, and $28.5 trillion, while a huge number, it's not totally outlandish when you compare it to the size of some other major markets out there.
Right. Global equities, they're valued at $106 trillion.
Uh-huh.
The global M2 money supply, it's about $123 trillion. The bond market, $124 trillion. And then you've got global real estate, the biggest of them all.
What's that, like $200 trillion?
Over $200 trillion, closer to like $220 trillion. So when you look at it like that, $28.5 trillion for Bitcoin, it doesn't seem that crazy.
Yeah, especially when you consider we're talking about a potential time frame of 8 years. But let's be real, there are still plenty of people out there who think this whole thing is just a bubble waiting to burst. I mean, you hear from big names like Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger. How do you respond to that kind of skepticism?
I think a lot of that criticism comes from, well, people who maybe don't quite understand Bitcoin,
Okay.
haven't really looked at the data, the technology.
We're just dismissing it out of hand.
Kinda, yeah.
Yeah.
They're stuck in the old ways of thinking about finance.
Right. And the funny thing is, Bitcoin doesn't have to replace everything to be successful.
Exactly. It doesn't need to wipe out banks or the dollar or even gold.
It just needs to find its place, right?
Yeah, carve out a niche in a few key markets.
And we're already seeing that.
We are. Businesses are starting to accept it.
Investors are investing.
Even countries are getting on board.
So someone's listening to this. They're thinking, okay, this is interesting. Should I be buying Bitcoin? Is now the time to jump in? What do you tell them?
Well, there's this interesting indicator. It's called the Mayer multiple.
Okay.
It basically looks at Bitcoin's price relative to its 200-day moving average.
Okay. So how does that help us?
Historically, when that multiple dips below 2.4, it's been a pretty good signal to buy.
And where is that multiple sitting right now?
Right now, it's at 0.89,
Wow.
which is significantly below the historical average, which is around 1.41.
So you're saying this could be a good time to buy.
Well, it's not a guarantee, obviously.
Right.
Bitcoin is volatile, but it does suggest that, this might be a good time to start thinking about dollar cost averaging.
Okay, for anyone who's not familiar with that term dollar cost averaging, what does that mean?
It just means you're investing a fixed amount of money at regular intervals, no matter what the price is doing.
Okay.
So that way, you're smoothing out the volatility a little bit,
Right.
and you're potentially lowering your average cost per Bitcoin over time.
Makes sense. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the big things our listeners should be taking away from all of this?
I'd say the key takeaways are, first of all, remember Bitcoin's scarcity.
That limited supply.
Yeah, that limited supply.
It's only going to get harder to get your hands on it.
Right. And then think about all those potential catalysts we talked about, the things that could drive up demand.
The remittance market, emerging markets, governments, big investors. It's a pretty impressive list.
And don't forget, the adoption is already happening.
People are using it.
Businesses are accepting it.
Countries are embracing it.
Yeah, it's not just some theoretical idea anymore.
This has been fascinating, I've got to say. It really makes you think about the future and what role Bitcoin might play.
Yeah, it's a whole new world out there.
And for our listeners out there, if even a fraction of these predictions come true, well, what does that mean for those who just ignored Bitcoin entirely? That's something to think about. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep into the world of market insights.